Yeah, no, it was
So. Look at the document. We're going to talk about DBQs in just one sec.
Oh, is that the question? Were you just looking at evaluate problems? Question. I'm pretty sure that's the it's the ultimate technology. Oh, I see. I think this is like a more elaborate way of saying this process. Yeah. Orally basically saying that it was slavery. And then. Oh, so you're trying to. So what you like to do is you have to reference six more all six have to be like and then three of them have to have.
All right, so let's talk about the DBQ. So this is pretty close to what you get on the AP exam. It is just an essay. You still have to do what you've done for the other essay we've done. We'll talk more about that. And opening paragraph where you need context. Remember that 2 or 3 examples of outside information, not in your essay, things that happen, background information. You need your thesis statement. You'll need the 3 body paragraphs. Each body paragraph has got to have a couple examples. Gee, I wonder where those examples will come from in a DBQ. Let me ponder that for a second. And a closing. It is just an essay. And I like using documents, they're very good, but so I will present this in a way that forget what I want, but also help you on the AP exam. Yes. Yeah,
You have to use 6.
6 evidence, and the indirect is basically what I say, it's just why. Why a thought.
You don't work.
No, and that's a good point. I'll say this, no quotes. And that might sound different than what you're used to with documents. Some classes I know you want to put like quotes, and no, your words. And in your words, you have to show not only, you're not summarizing the documents, you're showing how the documents can be used as evidence to reinforce your thesis. And that means it has to be related to what you already know. Yeah.
So
You would say,
or from like whatever.
you would say the Republican Party platform.
So we can reference the document.
Yes, you want to reference. And you want to cite, but you just can't quote. So no quotes. Actually, they say, okay, this is kind of the general rule of thumb that I've gotten over the years. One time, if you have like a 5-word quote that fits, that's okay. Other than that, your own words. So don't say from document 1. Say, as Albert Brown said. And then at the end of the sentence, you would put down in parentheses, doc.
Everybody cited it. Don't. It's actually.
Yeah, don't quote. You know why they don't want you to quote? Idiot who can copy. And that's, if you start copying stuff, that's a red flag to the person grading it. This person doesn't know anything, they're copying stuff. Even if you're not, they're supposed to accept that. So it'll look something like this. This is actually taken from a DBQ from a couple of years ago. I just blocked that in there. So it'll be something about a few things about context, 6 documents, that sort of thing, evidence, your information. That's why I said you have to relate it to what you know. It's not a summary of the documents. It's about the documents, what you know, can be used as one of your examples. And has that, and then you notice the question right below. And this is a very good question. This is the kind of question you want. You ever see the question? You might also see it called a prompt. You might also see it called just number 1. It might just say 1. But Evaluate the following statement. The ultimate cause of the Civil War was conflicting differences over slavery. This is what you have to do. Remember, we have a thesis. We have to have a why, something to tie it together. What's going to tie it together in this? Your position on this statement. Did you hear what I said? Your position is your why. Your position is your why. That's why we want questions like this. Because it's very easy to get a good thesis because you take a position, you back it up with your that A, B, and C, and those become the topics. Sound good to everybody? We want this. No, we're not quite there yet. I was going to get this done, and then I wanted it done this week, and then I realized that's crazy. Because I want to make sure you have time to go through the documents and ask questions. I want a really good DBQ. And so we're going to do it on Tuesday because we can't do it on Monday with short words. So I'm just going to cover this. No problem with that? I know you don't have a problem with it, but darn it, let's go today. But so we'll be into other stuff, but it'll be background material. I want it and things that mix in. So to go in. So remember, background material, thesis, and then remember, here's the thing about writing an essay. So you have your topic sentence and you have a little brief summary of what you're talking about there. And then you have to have a couple examples. These documents will give the examples. The purpose or what the document is trying to achieve, the goal of this document, that will be the example to prove your thesis. And so this is what I want you to do now with these documents. This is what your homework is going to be until Friday. Usually there'll be 6 to 8 documents. By the way, how many documents do you have to use? 6. And the reason we use 6, you get 1 point for using 3, 2 points for using 6. So how many do we use? All right. And read each document. Oh, and use these documents as evidence in your body paragraphs. Did everyone hear what I said? They're not in your opening paragraph. They're not in your closing. This is body. Now, you have to get 6 in the body. You can add 1 more, like in your closing paragraph, but 6 in the body. Yeah.
Last year, evidence for reading just like state whatever. It's, you know, just like last year basically.
Yeah, you'll get another point for using, and what I refer to, you say evidence, but outside evidence, it's just why they had that point of view. And actually, the AP call report, they call that half, and I'll explain why. They love that. You just have to add 1 additional sentence for 3 of the documents. And I'll explain that in a second. So I think we basically, yes. So the answer is yes. It's a little different than AP Euro, but not much. So what you got to do is for these documents, you notice we space it. So you have to do on your own. We'll do the first one right here in class, but then you have to do this on your own. What you have to do is just read them and please write them. There's space there, write on this, underline. I'm even going to collect these after the exam. And I'm not going to say, oh, you didn't write the right word down. I'm just going to see that you did. When you write an annotated document, it's kind of your shorthand. It's for you. So hopefully you can write 1 or 2 words and you know what you mean, just like you do that on your own notes or anything you do. It's for you. I just want to make sure that you've thought about it. And 2 things for each document. 2. And it might not be absolutely clear on the second one, but for the first one, what is the purpose of this? What is the goal? What are they trying to achieve? That's the first thing. What does they show, that first document, that you can use as evidence? So let's read this document right now. And what is this trying to show? Basically trying to show, oh, what's the first thing you do when you read a document? Who wrote it? When? We haven't gone to the Republican Party in class, but you've read about the Republican Party. So you should know what the original Republican Party, what it stood for. At least have an idea. I should also add, what section of the country was the Republican Party in? Yeah, they're up in the science wing, exactly. No! Yeah, they're in the north. There's no Republican Party in the South. Like literally, none. Which is so weird because the Republican Party today is very much a Southern party, but then it was a only north. So read it, and what are they trying to achieve here? What is the purpose? What is the goal? How can we use this as evidence? What does it show? And just jot down a couple words underneath it, what it means. Actually, 2 words will do it. Do it right, real quick. We're doing the first one in class. You already got it done, Gage? Sometimes the documents will be this short. Sometimes, use the space there to write them. Right on the documents. We should get some vocabulary. What is a territory? Yes, it's not a state. Territory. Very good. Yeah, you're right, 60,000, which is really small. I'm gonna make it.
Yeah. I'm fine with those things.
Yeah, they have. And then it's 7,000. Okay. So, what is it? What position are they taking on this? What show are they showing? They're not anti-slavery per se. Say it again. They're free soil. Now, there might be a lot of members that are totally opposed to slavery, but this is not anything about getting rid of slavery. Here, it's about free soil. No slavery in the territories. So this shows the Northern Republican free soil point of view. And that's what we use as an example of the Northern view, or that the Southern spirits free soil. The Republican Party platform shows that many Northerners were free soil and opposed to the expansion of slavery. And then what do you put at the end of that sentence? Document. Document. You put document, but same space, but doc. And parentheses. And that's how you use it in that would be your example to show the Northern Republic. Part 2. Why did they have this view? Why? And that's what these periods must call it evidence. But it's the same thing. What? Why did they think this? Why did the Republicans want free soil? Why did they fear the expansion? And there's another reason I'll give you. There's one huge one I've already given you about why they didn't want more slave states. Slave territories would become slave states. So what? A couple words, jot that down real quick. This is another one. 2 words. We're probably good. If you're not sure the words, describing is okay. It's one thing about terminology helps you see. You got it? What was it? What was the Northern Republicans' big fear? Yeah, there would be more of these pro-slavery states. What do we call that? What are the 2 words about the fear of expanding slave power going back to the Constitution? Slave power. That's slave power. So that's the big issue. They also were opposed to the system of slavery, thought it provided less opportunity, a very stifling system. But the big thing is the expansion of slave power. Remember, we've had the Talmadge Amendment, we've had the Wilmot Proviso, free soil, no expansionist. That's why. And so when you explain why, that one sentence for three of them, it could be the Republican Party had this view because of their fear of the slave power and the expansion of congressional control by slave owners, or something to that effect. I said it really fast. So you need 6 of that first part. 2 per paragraph, right? 3 additional sentences for 3 of them. Now, what is the great advantage of doing a DBQ? It gives you a little font. It triggers a memory. It gives you an idea, and also they'll kind of hint on what direction to go. They'll give you hints. It's kind of the direction you take your essay. And so in a regular essay, which the College Board loves acronyms, so it's called a free response question, or oh no, I'm sorry, that's the old one. An LEQ, they call it, a long essay question. They got all the writing free response questions now. But I've been doing this for a while. On a regular essay, you need a couple examples per paragraph. You have to come up with it. Here, it'll give you hints. It'll give you hints. You use this essay combined with what you know about free soil, and you've got it. What is the problem with this? You have to pigeonhole 6 of these documents into your thesis, into your outline. So you might have to try to fit them in to meet your argument. And that means you might have to adjust a little bit of your thesis to get 6 documents in. Does that make sense to everybody? That is the problem with the DBQ. I'm not going to lie to you. That's a little bit stressful, isn't it? You get these documents, they're all words. That's why narrow it down to these things. Basically, what are they trying to achieve? Why? Narrow it down, it makes it easier to plug in. And one more thing, when you do it, jot down a couple words, initials, something. Because you might think you'll never forget what's in document 1. So by the time you get to document 5, you've forgotten. Because you tend to be human. And especially when you start writing, you forget everything. Don't be that person who is doing their DBQ and they have no idea. And they got to go back and read it again while they're writing. Have that done, prepare before you. So the other 7 documents, a few words for each. That's what you have to have done by Friday. No other additional homework. Sound good? And then that way I can answer any questions. We can talk about and give you great hints. Now, online, I've already given you, but not online. I already gave you this before Thanksgiving. This shows sentences using documents. As documents, it shows sentences how they would be used. And also, I will put on Teams, and I'll have them on for the rest of the week, examples of full paragraphs of documents. But remember, all the documents are, those are your examples. That's what they are, as evidence. Summarizing as evidence. But one thing, look at the last document. It's a map. How do we do a map? Map. Okay, we haven't got to the election of 1860. We're going to do it tomorrow. That's why I said tomorrow's really tight turnaround. Let's do it. That's why I said. But we've done this map, haven't we? This is the election of 1852. Franklin Pierce won. What party was Pierce? And Pierce won. Now, this map shows that in 1852, the kind of euphoria after saving the country, the Democrats won a sweeping national victory, didn't we? Even if we knew nothing else about that election, we know that. This shows that the Democrats would win their last national election. This shows those issues. But why is the map like this? Now, we can't really get a bias. You know, the Republican Party was against slave power and free soil. We don't have that bias. But why? What do we know about this? 2 big things. First up, Democrats were given credit for saving the country. Now, that's not quite true, but they were, because what was passed, and they got the credit because they split, Democrats split it up. That compromise of 1850. That is why this map is the way it is. What's another thing? Fillmore, what do we call a northern politician who favored southern policies? Go, please. He's a doofus. So we could get northern votes, but appeal to this. That's one. So when you get a map, the map is a great way to, in your essay, show what has happened. Show what just happened. Now you're leaving. Okay, so the notes you have to get clocks, right? All right. Go through the documents, look at those material. I'll give you a little bit more. I'll give you a little bit more and we'll go from there. Let's go then to your notes out. Let's finish. We got to this, right? That look familiar to everybody? On Teams, I'll post this. I do have the documents now on there. I have all that material. I try to put everything on Teams. If you miss something, you can always go back and look at it. But I have, there's a PDF or something you can copy it. I try to put everything up there. Did we get to this? Did we mention the $5, $10 thing? All right, good. What senator broke up the compromise? It's the little giant, I heard, what was his name? Yeah, Stephen Douglas, the little giant, who originally proposed the compromise and went home thinking the country was over. Who would say, I come here not as a Massachusetts man or a Northern man, but an American trying to get this bill passed? Yeah, that's Webster, the angry owl. Who proposed 2 presidents? And who's Calhoun's brother? Raoul C. Calhoun, yes. And it passed. Pierce is elected. Who wrote Uncle Tom's Cabin? Harriet Beecher Stowe, whose brother was a very prominent anti-slavery minister, abolitionist minister, who would send weapons, for example, to Kansas when they started the conflict. He said they'd be more valuable than Bibles, so they called these new Sharps rifles Beecher's Bibles. But back to the fugitive of the slave law. This was the most controversial part of the Compromise of 1850 because it had direct impact on the North. To many Northerners, they saw this as a direct violation of what their rights were as states. The federal government had authority in the territories, but not necessarily in the states, even though the Constitution says fugitives must be returned. And they were furious about the also attempted bribery. So virtually every northern state in some way would pass laws that would be dubbed, starting with in Boston. By the way, isn't this a great poster? It really does, without a doubt. They're kidnapping people. They're slave catchers. I like how they put that. Hefty poster. Gage knows that. Yes, I thought, yeah, I got to mention that. That was really good. And the northern states began to pass personal liberty laws. And these laws, every state was different, but they basically laid out this idea that individuals don't have to be forced to go into a posse. They don't have to do these things. It's a violation of your rights. And yeah, it's really hard to defend this. But remember, constitutionality of laws is not decided until it gets a court case. And even then, it wasn't clear about judicial review yet. That's not clear. And so they passed it. Southern politicians went nuts. They went nuts. They didn't see this as, oh, you should obey the law. They saw this as a direct attack on their way of life. By passing these laws, they're slapping them in the face, implying that they're going to encourage their property to run away and not return their property, which might incur a slave rebellion because then they'll go back south and start a rebellion. They saw this as a direct attack on them and their rights to have slaves. And so Massachusetts might say it's our right as our state to decide whether or not we're going to force people into posses. You said there's you're depriving us of our rights as states to have slaves. And so they were furious. They saw this as more than just states upset about a law. And this idea of the South must protect the rights of states would turn into the cry for states' rights. And states' rights does not mean the protection of individual liberties and rights in states. Because they didn't want Massachusetts to pass personal liberty laws. It was their right to states to have slaves. States' rights was code, and everybody knew it, to do whatever it takes to have slaves. And so they wanted to be left alone to have slaves. And if anybody got in the way, they wanted the federal government to step in and squash it so they could have slaves. States' rights really did not mean the rights of states. It meant the right to have slaves. And so you'll hear after the Civil War, through this day, that people will claim that the biggest reason for the Civil War, they'll mention the word states' rights. But this is a classic example, as that was always not true. They didn't want northern states to give their people the right to not kidnap people and force them into slavery. States' rights would kind of percolate under the radar, and then the 1950s would come back as an anti-civil or equal rights. So we'll come back to the term states' rights, but we're not done with it. At the same time, boy, things are going to be happening fast. There was a group of Southerners, freebooters. A better way to put it was pirates. In fact, filibusters is a Dutch slang for pirate. These are Southerners who went down to Central America, and their plan was to overthrow these brand new Central American countries, overthrow them, have a coup, and then basically hoping that they could just kind of get away with it really fast, have a coup, ask for the United States to annex them and become slave states. So take it over by force, a pirate, a filibuster. And they went through here, went through here. So Central America tried originally to have one big Latin American country. Too many cultural differences, they broke up into many different countries. But that's why they all have blue on their flag, and they thought they were relatively weak. William Walker, who's right there, actually took over for a short time the government of Nicaragua and tried to get the United States to annex it as a slave state. And basically, he brought enough people, big cutthroats and hooligans, a bunch of other Southerners came south. And before he consolidated his hold in Nicaragua, he tried to invade Costa Rica and was stopped right about here, just north of Liberia, Costa Rica. The hacienda that's there is one of the most hollow grounds in Costa Rica, defending their freedom. I've been there, it's really cold. But eventually, William Walker would be overthrown, and what happens to dictators, especially out-of-country dictators who are overthrown, he would be assassinated, executed right on the spot. But this was happening, other efforts too, or maybe in Spanish-controlled Cuba. And that's going to lead to the Austin Manifesto by James Buchanan of Pennsylvania, who tried to be president a few years earlier. He was the Secretary of State. So Austin is a city in the relatively new country called Belgium, on the Channel. He was there with meeting of foreign ministers in Europe, and he issued this strange document called the Manifesto, where in it implies that the United States, it should be U.S. policy to take Cuba. This is not law. This has no authority at all. But the Secretary of State did it. So in a way, he's speaking for the Pierce administration. Remember, we've already had one of those. Remember the Monroe Doctrine. Remember that? No European intervention in the Western Hemisphere. And so the Austin Manifesto, take Cuba. And this cartoon, they call the doctrine here, implies it was Southern bullying of a doughface. Here are filibusters, these cutthroats forcing him to do this. And the reason why this is so important, think about Northerners. We're sitting there thinking, we kind of gave in and allowed for slavery potentially here and here. Oregon would have no slavery. Who knows what else is going to happen? And now they want more. Southerners haven't forgotten they might have got Mexico. And so where is this leading? Where's the expansion of slave power? And these bullies are doing it. And so this bullying, or like taking over something, will go to the floor of the United States Senate. Back in 1804, the Senate changed their rules to something that we would dub a filibuster today. Well, actually started being dubbed this in the 1850s. Okay, the Senate changed the rules. This was actually proposed by Aaron Burr. Remember him, the vice president? And it had no real reason. It was, Senate can make their own rules. The rules were inconsistent about when you end debate. And so they said, the Senate has unlimited debate. And what it means is a senator can stand at the dais, at the podium, and debate, which means talk for or against a bill or about anything they want. And unlimited means there can be no vote on the bill until everyone is done debating, AKA talking. Well, Southerners started doing this to stop bills about taxes and a couple other things back in the 1840s. Get the point here? Taking over the Senate like a pirate. And so they started calling it the filibuster. And this became a way for the minority to stop the majority from getting bills passed. Because they could sit there and talk and talk and talk and talk. Nothing will get done in the Senate until they are done talking. It was rarely used. But if you get 40 at this time men, how long can they talk? One guy can talk for 18 hours, the next guy can talk for 18 hours, the next guy can talk. Strom Thurmond talked for over 24 hours, the segregationist Southern Democrat, back in 1957 to stop a civil rights movement. And since he decided what would be debate, he read his grandmother's recipes. He read out of the Charleston, South Carolina phone book. It could be anything they want. This is what we call a talking filibuster. It was rarely happened, but it could happen. But it rarely did. So like in the 1960s, over 25% of all bills were passed, proposed bills. And that's really high. Of course, that was when big Democratic majorities and they had a president by the name of Lyndon Johnson. Nobody was more effective than Lyndon Johnson. That's both good and bad. Look how it drops. And now we're less than 1% of bills in the Senate get passed. Why? Well, originally, there's no way to stop a filibuster. They could talk. I should add, you can't leave the podium when you're talking in a talking filibuster. I'll let you ponder how he did it for over 24 hours, or maybe not ponder it. I'll let you decide. But they would, in 1917, would pass a rule saying it took 67. 67 senators could vote and stop a filibuster. After the big Southern filibusters to stop civil rights laws, they passed a law to make it 60. And so now it required 60 votes to pass a filibuster. But today it's called a two-speech rule. All a member of the Senate has to do is say, I'm going to filibuster this bill. They don't do the talking filibuster anymore. That does not exist and has not existed for over 40 years. What they do is this. They announce there'll be a filibuster and they'll vote to see if there's 60 votes to stop the filibuster. And if there's no votes to stop the filibuster, what happens to the bill? So all it requires is 40 senators to stop any bill. You see what happened? There were almost no filibusters. Look at the filibusters exploding. They really started, Republicans used it quite effectively to stop proposals by the Democrats under Obama. The Democrats did it under Trump. The Republicans did it under Biden. Nothing is passed now. That's why we got to relate to filibuster again. But the 60 vote comes 65, and then they called the two-speech rule, and that would be first 65, but eventually formalized itself. And so for over 40 years. And so there were a couple times as a show, they would ask senators to stop a bill. They would do like a 3-day talking thing. So, for example, Ted Cruz in Texas tried to stop a bill, a budget bill, about 10 years ago, and he sat and read like Dr. Seuss, stuff like that. Bernie Sanders tried to stop another bill, and he spoke for 18 hours. Yeah.
Like, I know you said you can't leave the podium, but with the guy who talked for 24 hours, like, they don't care. They're like, okay, almost.
Well, originally, once someone starts debate, they can't leave. And they changed the rules saying you can't leave a little bit out of business. And that's why now they just do it. So that's why nothing gets passed. And I'm saying this because it's important to know, we got to relate to history. I should add, who was the first person to do the filibuster? Anyone know? Steve Calhoun. Wait before you write this down. Why this is such a big deal? Yes, Calhoun started this horrible process. I should add one thing. Why is this so unusual? Nothing is passed in the Senate. Nothing. They have a couple rules where they need a majority vote. Other than that, they need 60 votes to pass anything. Yesterday, the Senate actually passed a law, passed a bill. That used to be not a big deal. Now it's like they passed a bill in the Senate. Something was done. Does anybody know what the bill? It's a big deal. Yes. Yeah, what happened was in the Dobbs decision that would throw out Roe versus Wade about abortion rights, and in the ruling, it said that the Supreme Court should revisit same-sex marriage and also interracial marriage, to allow states to ban those. And so there was a federal statute on that. And this was a big deal because they passed a law. Whatever you're feeling on that law. So, wow, they got over 60 votes for a law. 12 Republicans joined all the Democrats. Yeah. Interracial. Took a Supreme Court state, decision. Montana had laws. We could marry people who. Of course, all the time. People were arrested all the time. All the time. 1960s. But yeah, but there's talk about that could come back. Very open talk about it. And so they passed this law. Now, the big thing is, so basically the law says you can't, marriage cannot be denied you regardless of color of skin, sex, national. And yeah, the Lovey decision was a big decision. And, but here, back to this. They got 12 Republicans to vote. And so that's why nothing gets passed. So probably in the next Senate, there's going to be 51 Democrats, probably 49, probably. And nothing's going to get done. Republicans have a small majority in the House, and that's so, I mean, literally nothing is going to get done. So we'll see. Lots of hearings. All right, so let's move on. So this, let's get to the Kansas, Nebraska. I should add the Montana senators split on this. Tester voted for it, Daines voted against. All right, we're coming to the Kansas, Nebraska. Here's a little giant, which by the way, if you have to call the little giant because you're not very tall, don't take a picture where you're looking up at somebody. That actually kind of accentuates the fact that you're not very tall. Not that that should matter at all, but still. Douglas, the Democrat from Illinois, wanted to be president. He had the great achievement of 1850, and he thought he had another one. There was talk about the Transcontinental Railroad. He wanted a northern route to Chicago. He would get the credit. Now, it might not seem like north to us in Montana, but this was the northern route to San Francisco. He wanted that. So the Transcontinental Railroad, he wanted a northern route. But this is unorganized territory, administered by the various tribes and the U.S. Army. So they need territorial governments. But he knew the fire eaters would try to stop this. He had to find a way to appease the fire eaters. But what law said no slavery north of 3630 in the Louisiana Purchase? Yeah, that Missouri Compromise. Iowa had already come in as a free state under that law, and Minnesota was a free territory, soon to be a free state. So it had been administered. So Douglas proposed two free territories, Kansas, Nebraska. And how did the Southern fire eaters respond? We will blow the thing up. You won't get your railroad. We'll do a southern route from New Orleans. You won't get what you want unless you open it up to slavery. They didn't quite threaten civil war, but that's now, pretty much implied in every time they would talk. Douglas wanting to be president compromised. And the compromise would be that act. And it repealed the Missouri Compromise. Not for Iowa and Minnesota, but for every other place in the Louisiana Purchase. And opened up two big territories to popular sovereignty. That means they opened them up to slavery. And then they would decide by vote of the population, by vote, whether or not to have slave codes or no slave codes in the Constitution. So, for a while, for not quite a decade, Nebraska territory is going to be, actually this one's going to be for about 4 years. I'm not saying 4 years. Where you're sitting right now was open to slavery. So we think of Montana, think of the North, it was not a slave territory. Technically it was, until that happened. One of those weird quirks, I never think about it. Because when Montana was a territory, became a territory during the Civil War. So you can imagine what happened. Everybody's like, what a great law, what a good idea. Moving on. Everything blew up. The Whig Party died, gone, disappeared, imploded, gone. But not even that. A civil war is going to start. As settlers rushed in to take the land in Kansas from the people who lived there and scoop up this low-priced government land, you're going to have mostly free soilers coming in, but also some pro-slavery people. So free soilers would concentrate mostly in eastern Kansas, but like free soilers would be like in Lawrence or Topeka. Lecompton would be a pro-slaver. And the U.S. fort at Leavenworth, they're kind of have to be responsible for this, and they never had enough men. Soon there's going to be conflicts. Both sides are going to form militia, and soon it will be open civil war. You could argue that the Civil War began here in Kansas. In fact, it's hard to imagine a scenario where Civil War would not have happened after Kansas, Nebraska. Kind of tragically inevitable. Kansas, Nebraska would be that hinge moment. So the Compromise of 1850 is so big, it saved the country. Nebraska blew up that. Blew it up. Blew it up. So with that, free soilers are going to be dubbed jayhawkers. A jayhawk was a form of hawk. We're not sure exactly what hawk now. I've heard people say Northern Harriers, could be anything. But that's why Kansas to this day is a jayhawk state. And that was their militia, the jayhawkers, and that was a term for free soilers. Their militia would wear, I know we can't see it here, but they have red leggings on. And so they called them redlegs too. And these kind of battles, a lot of hit and run, burn down people's homes, try to scatter their livestock, sometimes murder. And it would escalate, decline, escalate. Don't think of like full-scale war, but this constant threat. And then the war would go all the way till 1865 in Kansas. Now, not as many pro-slavery people came, but so many crossed the border from Missouri, the pro-slavery people are going to be dubbed border ruffians. At first, this was an insult, and they'll say, yeah, we're the ruffians. And here it shows them outside of Lawrence on a raid. They would cross the borders. A lot of them would vote in the election, because how could you tell if someone's from Missouri or Kansas? So here it's supposed to be border ruffians voting about the Constitution, implying then that they'd be bribed with whiskey. But that would be the battle. And imagine escalating attacks going on, going through this pretty quickly, but these escalating attacks, every one is going to be publicized as massacres by jayhawkers or massacres by border ruffians. And then the climax in many ways will be the sack of Lawrence in 1856. Lawrence, Kansas was a free soil town. Border ruffians and pro-slavery Kansans, they organized an attack. The Jayhawker militia was out of the town trying to protect scattered farms. They rode into the free soil town, burnt many buildings down, and this is a very stylized photo. It looks at him like shooting a man in the face, trying to defend his home. Because Suna said it was a massacre of free soilers. It actually wasn't. Yes, they did horrible damage. They terrified people to try to get them to leave. They destroyed the Free State Hotel. Yes, it was called the Free State Hotel. But only one person was killed, and that was a border ruffian, shot by another border ruffian. Probably two drunk men. But it went throughout the North as a dastardly attack. Bullying attack by these filibusters, by these border ruffians. When news got back via the telegraph now, so with less than 2 days, Charles Sumner of Massachusetts would give one of the most important speeches, not because of what he said, but what's going to happen, called The Crime Against Kansas. He was an abolitionist. We'll explain these guys in just a second. He was the guy who befriended Taylor. But you also notice one other thing. Do you see it? He was a Whig. Whigs are gone. He's a Republican, the brand new Republican Party. He gave a speech where he not only attacked the brutality of the sack of Lawrence, implying that people were killed, he attacked the brutality of the border ruffians, but then the bullying and the piracy and the brutality of the South. And he mentioned by name Senator Andrew Butler of South Carolina, which is against Senate rules. This picture is kind of a comical picture. I can't help it. I want to chuckle every time I see this. He was a Whig, but when the Whig Party imploded, the anti-democratic Whigs became Democrats. The whole thing is blowing up. This was seen as a great affront to Butler. And his nephew, a young member of the House of Representatives, Preston Brooks, whose nickname was Bully, heard about this. The next day, decided to get his revenge. Now, the Senate chambers wasn't much bigger than this. The Senate, the chairs, the actual desks were really small and they had to be bolted in because as the country kept getting bigger, it was really crowded. They were bolted in so they couldn't move it because there's so little space. Sumner was a tall man, at that time over 6 foot tall, so pretty tall. He could barely fit in this desk. He was on an aisle, and the little cramped little aisles. Imagine just really all cramped in. Brooks, a member of the House, walked into the chambers, and they should have known something was up because all the galleries, the few seats up above, were all his friends. He was there to watch. And he was carrying his big walking stick. He walked up, and he kind of squeezed his way through it and said, "Sir, you have brought dishonor to my family. Prepare," and he was going to say, "to defend yourself." Makes it easy. And then started beating him over the head with his cane. I've said nothing. But beating him over the head, blood just gushed out. Sumner tries to get out, literally rips the desk out of the floor, and then collapses to the floor. As Brooks just keeps beating him. In the gallery, his friends were all there, start chanting, "Beat, beat, beat." Members of the Senate tried to rush to Sumner's aid, and other Southerners who knew what was happening, Southern senators, took their canes and kept him from rushing to the aid at first. Sumner would be knocked unconscious and nearly killed. Blood and also clear fluid started coming out of his nose. We're now about 90% sure that's spinal fluid. He would be so horrifically injured. He lived. He'd be bedridden for 3 years and never the same. I mean, this is premeditated murder. And this cartoon would show, and you notice Southern chivalry. They try to act like they're a Southern gentleman. Argument over clubs. And there's the pen and Sumner, that's his speech. And how the Southerners react to get to a speech they don't like, the argument would be, and clearly not all Southerners, beating and see the faces. The pain now, it's little damage, but it is in a bank. Don't ask me why, but a bank in Boston, Massachusetts. Sumner, though, was not, or Brooks was not arrested because he's a member of Congress. They kicked him out of Congress. He would soon be reelected and come back. And thousands of admirers across the South would send him new what? Canes. Hearing about Southern brutality. One man, last thing for today, who made it his life's mission to destroy slavery. And that is the painting of him in the rotunda of the Kansas State House. He didn't have his beard yet. He looked more like this. And his name John Brown. We just go, John Brown. Let's save that. But let me tell you one thing about Brown. See that picture? For years in the early 2000s, I was able to get that as my yearbook photo, the yearbooks. And people actually complained, parents actually complained, so they couldn't use it. And the office said, why do you have a picture of Abraham Lincoln? No, it's John Brown. I look totally different now than I do. That's a credit. Is that your story?
Well, it's not as like, it's interesting, it's not as much as like, but it's got a similar sort of.
Yeah, yes, and I wanted this one because it's shorter. But if you like it, there's one that's better, just a little bit longer.
Okay.
But by the same time, it turns it out, which same kind of really, I mean, it has that same kind of feel. Yeah. But it's short too. But I'm glad you liked it. It was good.
And then join the maps. Those tomorrow.
I totally forgot to say it on Tuesday.
See this. Yeah.
That's one, no, that's me. That's not John Brown. They're.
Do you have that? Oh, I already told Archie this story. Me and my friend went to the library to look for a yearbook. I ended up figuring out like he's one of the longest teaching teachers. Yeah. So I'm excited to look into it, and I would see. I keep not. I looked in the Miles City directory at the Lewis and Clark Public Library, and I found not only his parents' names, by the way, Partridge. Actually, no, I need to confirm this. Was your mom a certified public accountant? She is. I knew it. Hey, so, but I'm supposed.
Yes, I did have a face.
Did have curly hair, which is disturbing and fine.
Had what?
You also did have like so much curly hair.
Yeah, my hair gets, it is a little bit longer.
Yes,
Yeah, my hair was fairly long.
I guess I just didn't expect it.
Private. Now, I'm for sure I'm doing that my last year. Because as you notice, I am one of the longest tenured here since about now. We were here yesterday. Yeah, a few more. I gotta talk to this person. So you weren't.
It wasn't verified, but. I'll stay together.
You're gonna be driving a motorcycle.
It was, I was fine, you don't take fine lessons. So that's just wild. And
Nothing is safe.
the FAA is letting me in the air. That's wild. No, it's not a question.
We'll talk, yeah.
Like, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so then I was like researching for like punching all of the intakes. So I was trying to make it as good as possible.
That was, yeah,
So I was other stuff. Like probably like the basic of got the kid, nice to paint.
paint on the wood. But they would put a cloth on there, and the whole thing about that was sheet of hard. But if you had a little bit of well.
So I would just.
Yeah, skip blocks.
Okay.
All right, good, yeah, that's a really good one. In fact, you can do a shield, you can do the shield and draw it. That's pretty good. Hey, shield. Hey. That would be really cool. It's such a good poster now. I'm not actually that talking about. And APUS history, they grade a lot. You, these are you going first? Going first? We'll talk about it. Yeah. First or second? Yeah, that's the thing. You choose. If you're prepared, just have to take. Yeah. John Brown. Really popular song. 1850s, 1860s, soldiers would sing it marching to war. Marching to battle is called John Brown's Body. I don't know if there's another one.